I'd say there's a pretty positive change. When you first show up, like people are usually kind of giving you the stories, the sort of typical bat stories, but over time they're like genuinely getting interested in them, or start to like you get those old stories that you hear all the time. Maybe you come back and the person like comes up to you and says, okay, well I've noticed this about bats now because they've been watching or paying closer attention. So and just genuinely more interested in them, asking more questions on what can they do to help. Lots of interest in like, we want to build bat boxes now. Those sorts of things. So. No snakes, but we did have an observation of is it a bullfrog? So the question was, looking at eastern small-footed roosts, did we have any observations of snakes? Because I don't think any snakes, but there was a frog in one of the tracks. So we thought maybe was it a bullfrog? Okay, yeah, we thought maybe the bullfrog was in there trying to eat it. Right, so we tracked silver hares throughout different parts of the summer. We only had, I think, 15 that were tracked. Not all of those were in the migratory window, so we might have only had a handful during the migratory window. But yeah, those are just like the most recent notice tracks that we could pull out before those. In the fall, yeah. All the movements are outside of Ontario around the fall.
Was there any morphometric change among the 3 years for the bats that you captured? Are they getting bigger? Are they getting not much change?
Potentially, we haven't looked at that yet. We're still going through the data. We just sort of were able to compile the last 3 years, but we have so many little brown records that we potentially be interested in. Looking at that. Some are just like, well, we really want to know, like we have this important habitat. We want to know what bats are using that habitat because like this is our special place. So we want to know if the bats are using it because we also want to protect that place and the bats. So there could be those questions.
I mean, the knowledge of bats, right? Everybody learn more.
Yeah, like just like sharing stories about bats. We were able to actually just this week heard an additional origin story of bats. Which is interesting, and we'll be able to share that with the communities going forward. But
I saw you were talking about the map with the Morse towers. I imagine those are like Morse towers.
big Morse towers?
Yes, they're full size.
Full size, yeah. So yeah, the same. We actually have one just outside. So we want to look at one after that.
I was just wondering if like funding issues we're talking about like impacting you guys to get some Morse towers in those spots that you were hoping to fill.
Yeah, so part of it, putting them up, most of those are put into, some of them aren't in First Nations, but over half of them are. Requires sort of either the Schwanger team or Derek to maintain those. So we had to have some problems over the project with towers potentially going down. We didn't notice it right away. So yeah, we need to make sure that we can continue monitoring them to making sure they're maintained and not operational. Thank you.
you're more than good. Maybe tilt a little bit to the. Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank my invitation for welcoming us all here. Really appreciate the opportunity and super grateful for being here. This photo here, this nice image on the screen you see is our Wild About Bats poster, and the next thing I'm supposed to say is that I have a whole stack of them at the front for people to grab if they wanted to pick up a poster, but I left them back in the office. So there is a link if anybody's interested in these. You can come for free if you Google Canadian Wildlife Federation Wild About posters. You can request, you can order one, we'll mail it to you for free. I can also send a link around the internet if you like it. So, in getting at this theme of it takes a community to raise a bat, I'm going to explain a bit of our journey in bat conservation. And you know, back in 2013, 3 bats were listed as endangered in Ontario due to white nose syndrome. And then a lot of organizations moved to address this huge threat of white nose syndrome in Canada, which CWF was not one of them, because we were saying a lot of organizations looking at that, let's look at some of these other threats to bats that maybe the ones that don't succumb to white nose syndrome to ensure that they're not impacted by other threats. One of the other threats we're looking at is the impact of habitat loss, and primarily habitat loss in the form of roosting sites. What we're looking to do is provide bat boxes or alternative roosting sites for bats in a white nose syndrome scenario. The extent and impact of evictions of bats losing access to the roosting sites were not then and now even that well understood in Canada. A recent study out of McGill was finding that participants in batwatch.ca, so these people reporting on the roost sites in Quebec, of those 36% of participants in batwatch.ca had evicted bats in Quebec, which is pretty high, I think, and this is already a population of people that are that aware, right? So I think in the general population is probably quite a lot higher than that. So we were looking at providing bat boxes or alternate habitat for bats that were evicted, but now we're asking, was this doing any good? Did bats actually use bat boxes? Which led to several years of radio telemetry work and the Canadian Bat Box Project, which I'll go ahead to look at the use of bat boxes across the country. And then this brings us to the next question of what we can do better, and looking at the results of those studies. And from there, where do we go from there? So initially we were looking at installing bat boxes. There was more thought in going into it than let's just put up a bunch of bat boxes, but ultimately that's what we were doing. We put up 150 in the Ottawa area, 3 different designs to kind of look at what, if there's a preference from one design to another for bats using bat boxes. And we did try to focus on homeowners that were looking at evicting bats to, at the same time, provide alternate habitat for bats that were losing access to the roost. But this comes back to the question of, are we doing any good? Are the bats actually making use of bat boxes? Are these bat boxes effective and working for bats? So we worked with the Conservation Society of Canada and Karen Vanderwolf in launching the Canadian Bat Box Project, which was looking at providing insight into this knowledge gap, which is to what extent bats use bat boxes, and how does that help provide habitat and to address this threat of habitat loss in Canada. Which ultimately was promoting the citizen science project, community scientists to observe the bat boxes, record the information of the bat box occupancy in relation to the sizes of bat boxes they had put up, and document microclimate and overheating events through temperature loggers that people were installing. Putting all that data together to look at whether some bat boxes are being used more than others and what are the common characteristics of such boxes. Ultimately, at the same time, we're identifying roosts, ideally maternity roosts in the process. So with the Bat Box Project, we would have people fill out an online survey that would provide information about their bat box type, the size, how it's installed. They would then monitor bat boxes through follow the monitoring protocol and report on it through another online survey for bat counts to then provide the data for the use of bat boxes. At the same time, a subset of people were installing these temperature loggers in different chambers of the bat boxes to get the internal temperatures of that the bats are experiencing, both in occupied and unoccupied boxes, and collecting guano samples that we could do DNA analysis on to determine the species of bat. And we had over 1,500 people across the country reporting their bat box usage in Canada, and there's a map of the distribution of responses, so pretty good coverage across the country. And a subset of those, we got that. So there's a bunch of results in this project, and I'm going to talk about all of the results we have in here, but a few things I want to point out that nearly 40% of people who responded to have bats in their bat boxes. So 40% of the bat boxes that were reported on did have bats. Now this is whether bats were in that bat box at one point in time over the lifespan of that bat box, so it doesn't mean it's a consistent community of bats or colony of bats the entirety, so that's one caveat on that. What I found really interesting is that of the species that are using bat boxes, the vast majority are little brown rabbits, like 4 times more than we had for big brown bats in bat boxes. So this is the 225 across Canada. In Ontario, it was not quite as pronounced, but still twice as many bats in bat boxes were little brown rabbits than big brown bats. Now, most of these colonies are what we consider small colonies, so there's a number of bats in each box, and more than half were less than 10 bats in a bat box. Let's go on. So this led to some great analysis by Karen to tease out which showed up 5 key factors that would predict the occupancy of bat boxes. And I'm not going to go into all these 5 in detail. We developed a guide for bat box design and installation. It's on our website at helpthebats.ca, which kind of goes into a lot more detail, a whole guideline of what people can do to follow for bat box dimensions and installation guidelines. But basically, this comes down to the size of the bat box, the height at which it's installed, what it's installed on, how long it's been up, and the last one is the number of bat boxes out of site. We're also now working with bat box builders in Canada, and some are actually modifying their designs to meet these criteria that we've come up with. We have on our website now a list of people that are making and selling bat boxes that meet our minimum size designs based on what we found based on this data. We're then providing a one-pager, an endorsement. I think it's not a certification program, but like an endorsement saying that they can use as promotion for their own bat boxes and provide with the box to say this bat box has been looked at by Canada Federation and does meet the minimum sizes of this national study. So it gives them a bit of a promotional aspect as well. An additional factor of the data was that sites where evictions took place, evictions were exclusions, it says exclusion, but it was either or, were significantly more likely to be occupied, which you would kind of think that's quite likely, but how do we know that the bats that were evicted from the building are the ones that are using the bat box? And this is where some tracking settings come in. So instead of nets, catch bats, we tag band bats, we tag them, and try and figure out where they go, make sure that we release them, get up in a slow motion for this video of bat capture.
It's going.
Just give it a bit. Just one. Okay. So now this actually this is about half an hour from here. This homeowner was already looking at evicting bats. We took up the opportunity to do an eviction study at the same time to ask where do bats go when they're evicted from bat roost. This video looks really bright. It was taken like at sunrise, so it's actually darker than it seems. It's the morning after eviction. This building is where the bats are going. There's about a 6-inch gap at the bottom there. The bats can climb up behind these boards. It's about a 20-inch wide. This whole building is pretty filled with holes and gaps and bats can get in, so it's one giant bat box. Notice that there's a bat box on the wall there. They want to have nothing to do with that. We get back in their original setting. Now, you see these bats persistent, and we're calling this an attempted eviction. Because that's what's going to happen. This was a DIY that the homeowner was doing this themselves, so it wasn't professionally done, but it would take a lot of work to keep that from its entire structure. Some data analysis by Sarah Watson at Christian Games Lab at Carleton, looking at these are newly installed bat boxes at the same time as the eviction. The bottom left graph is the year of the eviction, attempted eviction, and the bars are the number of bats in different bat boxes that we just put up. And looking at this, within 6 days, the first new bat boxes started being used by bats after the eviction, attempted eviction. And it kind of grew over the next few days. The graph on the right shows the following year when we went back to look at bat box occupancy. You can see that one box in particular was consistently being used again. And this also happened to be the largest box we installed with the right number of chambers based on our study. And on the building, like our study design, or the bat box study shows, this is before we knew the results of the bat box study, but just so happened this one is the one box that met all those ideal characteristics as well as the bat box study. Right, we also did 6 other radio telemetry events in the past years, different set 3 different colonies. Another one now around Ottawa, and one north of that in Gatineau. We were able to relocate or refine 56 different bats, 4 different bats, and 564 different tag locations. Separate routes necessarily, but we found the tags 564 times over those 6 events. Carried out by vehicle tracking and by foot. And out of those, we found the vast majority, so like an 87% there of the tag bats. This is all around Iris. We're making use of buildings. Now, we probably think, okay, well, they're just using the same building that you caught them at. And no, actually, only 12% of the time are they using that same initial route where we did the capture. Now, if we add in the amount of times we found in the bat box, we're actually up to 96% of the time that bats are using anthropogenic structures during tracking events. As I mentioned, these other tracking events did not have evictions at all. It's only the Perry Sound one, the very first episodes had no eviction or attempted eviction. Also to know that these habitats are very forested, like basically like around the same habitat as around here. So there's no lack of forest habitat use sites. So it's kind of a long journey on coming back around to this concept that it takes a community to raise a bat. So we know there's a large reliance on anthropogenic structures. We know bats frequent our communities. I should say anthropogenic structures, again, this is specifically little brown bats. We also did one tracking event on big brown bats and found a very similar pattern. We know bats are across Canada in many communities throughout the country. We know which bat boxes are most effective, the species that use them, and what situations, like during evictions. And we're calling this a attitudes study. We're launching a study into the attitudes and behaviors of participants in the Canadian Bat Box Project to look at ways to better engage participants in bat conservation and bat activities, but at the same time looking at whether their participation will also lead to potentially better bat-friendly behaviors as well. So that's we're just starting to launch that right now. So what do we do now? There's a lot of things can be done. One of them is we're looking at partnering with Wildlife Conservation Society of Canada in a bat-friendly communities program. WCS Canada created a bat-friendly communities program to see bats. In British Columbia, there's a guideline on certifying your community as a bat-friendly community. Canadian Wildlife Federation, we also have a backyard habitat certification program. So combining these two initiatives, we're looking at launching this certification for communities to be considered bat-friendly. And yes, it will go beyond bat boxes. So we're looking to engage community officials, whether this be municipal officials, First Nations councils, university officials, to commit to bat-friendly practices in their community. So this would be things like maintaining natural habitat, maintaining roost trees, yes, bat boxes, minimizing the use or eliminating the use of pesticides, but also raising awareness in the community. And Stephen's presentation is amazing about what they've done in the communities to engage the community. That kind of training is the type of work we would love to pursue in looking at certifying communities as bat friendly. And here's my pitch that we're just getting started, so it's not a full program yet, but we're looking for interested communities. And I said we're engaging with the officials, but we're also looking for champions within those communities that can pitch this to officials and help us engage people, just like bee-friendly cities, bird-friendly cities. We'd love to bring bat-friendly cities to the national level and have all these communities and people engaged in bat conservation, bat-friendly practices. So I want to thank all of our amazing partners and supporters, but especially thanks to all the participants and volunteers for their countless hours of monitoring bat boxes and highlighting some of the bat houses and bat boxes that they've been monitoring over the years. Yeah, question back. How we got the counts? So wondering how we got the counts in bat boxes across Canada. So these were individual people that we engaged with through our social media, through parents, contacts, through some professional biologists in Parks Canada and others, but most of them are homeowners who would go out and count, do emergency counts following protocol that we provided. For the bat boxes that didn't have any bats, basically we're telling people to check it first with a light during the day. If there's no bats, it's a pretty easy survey. If there are bats, we go back and count them. Others? Yes? Down there? Yeah, I thought it'd be fun to put that one in. That's actually an idea from Steve and Cal. When we first were tracking bats our first year here in Parry Sound, we were doing we were doing hand tracking with like a 3-element Yagi, which doesn't have much range. Steven had a setup on his roof rack with his car, and we're like, this is amazing. We need to do something like that. So we invested in some 4-element Yagi antennas, and basically they're 3x3 posts put into the back of a pickup truck. Has like the post holes for like racks to go on. Basically just built a frame with 3x3 posts and then screwed the Yagis onto the top of that, and then strap that down to the front of the truck so that the wind resistance would snap off those 3x3s. So it worked pretty well. I've done that with a rental vehicle truck as well, and those post holes are pretty universal, so you can kind of put it on any kind of truck. You might have to change the width of the top bar, but it's basically a top bar on posts.